Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. I was racking my brain as to what I should do for my next podcast episode because I like to give you either something to think about that you can take and expand to your own, or just some very concrete, something to take away, learn it, use it, and make your team better just directly. So it's a little bit of thought-provoking, a little bit of practical knowledge. And I mostly like to stick to at least a little bit of practical because what good is the information if we can't use it? So today I started looking through it and I'm like, I have never gone through the stages of a team. I have gone through how we learn as individuals and how we grow how we learn and develop, and how that associates to delegation. So I have a podcast episode of how to delegate right. So go check that out if you haven't checked it out yet. But in there, I talk about the 4 stages of how we learn and how that helps us walk an individual from learning something new, even if they're a veteran, all the way through to where they're doing it to the point where they don't even realize they're doing it. So I walk you through that and how you can use that to help train new employees, to help develop your current employees, and to help coach and delegate them appropriately to make sure that you're giving them the right leadership that they need in that moment of their learning point. Similarly, there is a very similar process and stages for a group of people, for a team. So we call it the development or the stages of a team development. And again, there's 4 with the kind of an additional 5th, just like in the development of people. And there are specific ways that we want to lead that team when they're going through those phases. And I always find it super helpful to be able to take a step back and say, where are we at, and name it, because you can heard it in many different things, but when you can name it, you can tame it. There's other renditions of that, but basically when we can name something, we can do something with it. We can say, we're here, I'm going to apply these specific actions, and we've got something tangible to grasp onto, which always helps. Because, as leaders, we don't know everything, we don't know it all, and there is not an instruction manual specifically for our specific team. So we need help, right? When we can identify the problem, we can then come up with the right solution to solve the problem, which then makes us more successful. So here we are. Let's talk through the stages of the team. So I'm going to address each of the stages. I'll give you a description of each. And then I'm going to give you a description of what the leader needs to be doing during that time and what the team members need to be doing at the time. So just kind of some tidbits of the things that we'd be learning, some actions that we'd be doing, and to help you guide your team members through them all. And then I'll touch on the 5th stage a bit, and then we'll wrap it up. I will dive deeper into some of the elements that I discuss in other podcast episodes, just because I think this will get very long the way I've got it plotted out at the moment. So I don't want to get too deep into other topics that are going to distract us from the 4 stages. So this is the one with the 4 stages. I will let you know when I'm doing the follow-up with the other episodes of some deeper diving into things. And I think it'll be subsequently after this. All right, so 4 stages. So we've got 4, they rhyme. It's wonderful. It's easy to remember. Just the order sometimes people get wrong. So the first stage is forming, second stage is storming, then the third stage is norming, and your 4th stage is performing. And that little extra 5th stage that we sometimes is there and sometimes isn't is called adjourning. So it doesn't rhyme as well. So not as much fun to keep in the. So I'm going to walk you through each of the stages and kind of how to use them. So the first stage, forming. So this is quite obviously, as the name suggests, this is when the team first comes together. So you've got a new group of people, you've got people that may have worked together before in other areas, might not know each other at all, and really just they don't really maybe understand what the project is or what the task is or how they're going to work together. So kind of they're just like, oh, I don't know how everything is. They may be really excited because they're like, oh, we're starting something new. This is super fun. But they also may be really like, gosh, another group session. Anybody remembers group work from high school and college, university? Sometimes it's wonderful. And other times you're like, oh no, I have to pull their weight and my own. So teams work well. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. These 4 stages are to ensure that we don't have that horrible feeling with the team that when they come together and you're like saying, oh, now I'm gonna have to pull everybody else's weight. So this is the way to, like, following these stages and following these steps is the way to make sure we are all pulling our own weight and getting the thing done that needs to get done. Okay, so forming. Let's get back to the topic. So in the forming stage, again, we might be very excited. We might be feeling apprehensive because we've had bad experiences with teams before or group work before. So as a leader, the things you need to be doing, you need to be setting the expectations. When we talk about this a lot, I used to be part of all these group like Kaizen events. When I first started working, I was the lean manufacturing implementer. So we'd always do these group Kaizen events. And the first thing we're supposed to do is set our ways of working or set the rules of the day or the week, the session that we were going to do. And it always felt a little trite. Like it felt, this is just, why are we taking this time to do this? Because like, it doesn't mean anything. So that's wrong. They do mean something. And setting expectations is hugely critical in any relationship, work environment, or any of that stuff. Forming is the most important stage. And when it's not done right, it makes the rest of the stages harder. Well, it really gets you stuck in stage 2, to be fair. So if you're ever struggling with a team, first thing is you want to go back to forming. So in this forming stage, the setting of expectations, this is not just ways of working, like we're going to meet on Wednesdays, we're going to do this report, we're going to do these metrics, because that is part of it. But the other way is to really get an understanding of how we expect to interact with one another. I like to use personal things in these examples because it helps us to kind of take it away and really understand it better, because we've all kind of been there. Let's say you've got a roommate, spouse, whatever. We all, somebody has to do the dishes, right? So some people might define doing the dishes as washing the dishes and putting them in the drainer thing, right? Like to dry. Other people might define doing the dishes as washing the dishes, drying the dishes, and putting away the dishes. So if you have 2 people with these different belief systems, you've got one person who thinks they're doing a great job, they're doing what's expected, washing the dishes, they leave them there to dry, and it's a separate task to dry and put away, or to just put them away once they're already dry. And then you have that other person who believes the other, and they're sitting there going, he never finishes the job, right? Or she never finishes the work, and I always have to come back later and put them away, and it's so annoying. And there's this tension that gets created now that there's nothing malicious being done, but there's actually just 2 separate levels of expectations. You both say getting the dishes done, but you have a different meaning behind what that means. So this is the type of conversations we need to be having very early on in a team. So when we say, okay, when you come to this meeting and you're going to report on these tasks, we're going to go through these action plans, and we're going to update each of the actions. The expectation is that you have taken it as far as you can take it to complete it, and you've followed up with somebody, you've done all of this task to work to say I've marked it off, versus saying, well, I tried to do this thing and I sent so and so an email and they didn't get back to me. That's a different level of expectation. Well, that is usually not what is meant, but those kind of like being very clear so that everybody knows from the beginning what the expectation of how you show up to the meeting is. Or we have to send the agenda out the day before so that everybody is prepared with the tasks that they need. They're not just getting assigned in a meeting and they're like, well, I didn't do anything. And then now we have an extra meeting that we didn't need because, nobody's prepared for it. So very much clarifying what we mean behind these situations that we've set, or behind each task that we've set, as well as how we're going to interact with one another. So, if you need help, then maybe, is it like you go before the meeting, you go after the meeting, you send an email, you go to the person's boss, or whatever that is. Like, how does it look like to receive help from a peer? How does it look like to get an extension? How does it look like to ask for more money? Or how does it look like to assign tasks to somebody? Like what do those processes look like? A lot of times we see on those lists, we see something like be respectful. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Because again, respect might mean saying please and thank you, or it might mean having a conversation like, oh, how was your weekend? And how, and being like extra personable. So clarifying that, because sometimes we have misunderstandings that are around those sorts of expectations that are just misunderstood or misdefined or differently defined. So once we assign those, we start setting those expectations, we develop roles and responsibilities. So the leader initially would bring people into the team to meet certain roles and responsibilities of that team. The team would then work together to, again, clarify those expectations, as well as clarify how those roles and responsibilities work, and looking at, okay, what happens when they don't? What happens when we need an adjustment? Obviously, I've talked about Working Genius a few thousand times on this podcast. So when we do Working Genius with a team, we might say, you know what, you were brought in to be the task finisher, but you're actually super low on tenacity, but you're great at this part of it. So actually, we're going to take that part of your job and give it to this person, and you're going to take this portion of this person's job, and then we're going to move these tasks over here. And so you start sorting out how you're going to most efficiently do those roles and responsibilities. So that's part of what's happening within forming, and they can be adjusted again in any stage, but this sort of thing should be happening in forming. Getting to know one another is happening. So having that Working Genius workshop right in the front end of a team is going to help sort out a lot of things, both with how we work, but also with how we work with one another. So we deal one-on-one with one another. I like to use the example of somebody might have this genius of wonder linked with a genius of galvanizing. Okay, so they're wondering about something, but then sometimes it might sound like they're trying to get you going on it and go like with the galvanizing end. Whereas someone else might be hearing that and saying, am I supposed to be doing this thing? And then now we have a misunderstanding of what's gone on, particularly if that person with that G is the leader of the team. So clarifying and saying, okay, I have galvanizing, and sometimes when I'm wondering, I sound like I'm galvanizing. I'm going to clarify in the beginning of the conversation that I'm not. Or if you're questioning it, be comfortable to ask me, because I might not realize I've just done that. So if you think I've just galvanized you, then say, okay, pause. Did you just galvanize me, or are you just pontificating on something? And you can clarify that, and that opens up that conversation. The other things that we want to do, I've made a list so I don't forget things. The other things that the leader is going to be doing is they're going to start setting, okay, how do we meet? When do we meet? How are we tracking these projects? So they're going to set that again with the team. And then the team is going to have to take that, own it, assign who does it, and make sure they're doing it. Amongst all of this team working and all these team working elements, the leader also needs to be supporting each individual that reports to them individually. So that is the coaching sessions. That is looking at those individual development things. Like maybe that person is struggling because they've never learned how to do this skill. So making sure that they're able to get that skill trained and they're getting sent to a training session if need be. That the leader is still very much supporting. And in terms of time for a leader, this forming stage is the most time. It's the same as if you have a new employee start. So I have an individual that needs to be onboarded. That leader is going to be taking more time. You're going to be meeting more one-on-one with the person. You're going to be making sure they understand things. You're going to be checking in. How are you doing? How are you getting along with everyone? How is this project going? How are you learning with this? How are you feeling? So all of these sorts of things that happen when you bring an individual on also happen with the team. So that leader would need to meet again with the team. How are we doing? How are we getting to know one another? Okay, do we understand the task at hand? This is the goal. Do we have it? Have we defined what we're going to do, what the project looks like, how we're tracking it? So very high touch part for the leader, but it is so critical. And if we do this well, the other parts get easier. So that's the forming phase. It's kind of the get to know you, figure out what we're doing and who's doing what phase. The next phase that every team will move into and hopefully move out of, and this is the problem, if we haven't done forming well, we sometimes don't move out of this second phase. So the second phase is storming. This is kind of what it sounds like, where you're starting to have little explosions of personalities, misunderstandings, trying to clarify who's really doing this role or how am I actually doing this. So we've set an expectation and a standard, and now we're using that expectation and that standard. So this is the time when we have to address the conflict that comes up, and we need to revisit and adjust our expectation, our ways of working, have these conversations out, because, sometimes this is when the fighting starts to happen. So this is where I age myself a lot, and maybe I Americanize myself a lot. But this is that stage when people stop being nice, like they have been informing, and they start getting real. So if anyone gets my real world episode, illusion there, and you're on the same wavelength as me. But that storming phase, this teams get stuck here a lot, and they get stuck here because they fear this conflict. Everything was really nice in the forming phase, and sometimes you're like, oh, well, that's fine, that little weird idiosyncrasy, that's not going to bother us in the long run. That's fine, we're just kind of getting used to each other. So we ignore things sometimes in forming, and then after it's like starts to grate on us. So now we have to start saying, oh my gosh, I have to deal with it. Okay. So again, the sooner you deal with it, the better. But this storming phase is when it starts to come out and starts to really bother people, or we start to see that differing of expectation or the understanding behind each expectation. And now we have to deal with the conflict that results from it. So I'm going to do another episode about conflict, the conflict continuum, and what it looks like and how it means. But the idea of this conflict continuum is that conflict is good. And sometimes, in order to keep peace, we just have this pretend niceness, right? I don't want to say anything because then it'll just make them angry, and then we just won't get anything done. So I'll just sweep it under the rug. And then that really starts to bother you. So we have this pretend nice, but we have this underlying conflict. Usually you'll see sidebar meetings, you'll see a lot of like after the fact sort of happening, versus you've got just downright mean, right? So you've got one end of fake niceness and another end of like malicious. Okay, obviously we don't want to be on either end. We want to be somewhere in the middle, and I usually say somewhat left of center. So a little bit on the nicer side of center, because, we all know our averages. We're going to spill in either direction, and we'd rather spill a little bit nice rather than mean. So again, it's not about just getting along all the time, but it's about, okay, we have something that's not working out. Let's deal with it. And it's being able and comfortable enough to call it out, deal with what is happening, and understand, is it a misunderstanding? Is it a change that we need to make? Is it something that how do we deal with this? How do we solve the conflict? Because if the team doesn't work, the project doesn't work. So this team working, this is critical, and we have to get it right. And learning how to sort through conflict, to problem solve when we're personally involved, is huge for that. So as a leader, you will be doing many facilitated discussions during this time. Someone's going to say, so-and-so isn't pulling their weight. And someone's going to say, so-and-so is always telling me what to do. So you're going to have some conflict right here. And they're both telling you something maybe in a one-on-one. Your job, bring them together and let's have this conversation out. So might sound scary, might be like, oh, they just don't get along and I just don't want to deal with that. But that's your job. That is your job in this phase. You're in this storming phase, and you need to help people deal with it. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to work together. It's going to only get worse. And what will happen is anybody who works beneath them will get worse, and they won't want to work in each other's teams. They won't want to work together. It'll make the whole thing start to split. Teaching those two how to get along is part of your job. Yes, it sounds like parenting, doesn't it? So you're going to sit them down. You're going to facilitate these conversations. You're going to say, okay, you're saying this, you're saying this. Basically, you're going to teach them how to have a conversation. I will likely do another podcast episode about that, because there is a lot more to get into about the nuance of how do we have these conversations? How do we teach others to have these conversations? And starting to expand it from there, because that is really the crux of storming. It's finding where the rough spots are and addressing them. Again, it'll look like facilitated conversations. It'll look like adjusting roles and responsibilities. It'll look like reminding people of the standards that we set in forming. and following up with that. It'll also look like adjusting those standards, adjusting those, or re-clarifying what they actually mean, because typically that's what we find, is that you'll set an expectation and then we'll see that, well, not everybody fully understood what that meant. So let's adjust it, let's clarify it, and let's make a note so that when someone else joins our team, we can really make sure that they understand it as well. So the next phase that we'll move into, I really consider this one a transitional phase, but it's the norming phase. So this is when the team will start to walk on their own a bit. So if you've done a really good job of setting the standards and forming, and a really good job of helping them to learn to deal with conflict amongst themselves in storming. Now, norming is where, as a leader, you're encouraging them. So they might come to you again, like maybe for the third time over, with maybe a different, similar conflict, but a different conflict. And you'll say, okay, well, remember how we dealt with it with this one? What do you think you should do first? What would you do? And how are you going to do that? Okay, so you're going to go do that. So you're going to start encouraging them to have those conflict resolution conversations on their own. We're going to encourage that to happen, maybe with a little bit of your support as you're kind of coaching each one, before they go into the conversation, or maybe saying, you know how to deal with it, right? What would you do? Okay, go do it. So, and then encouraging them, just go take it on. You can deal with this. This is your role. And this is where they start to gain confidence. So if we remember, confidence building is really just about gaining experiences, disprove your deep-seated thoughts, right? To change those deep-seated thoughts, and it'll help you to say, yeah, I guess that is correct, isn't it? So this is that stage where you're pushing them to do more on their own, and you're starting to step back. So you might say, you know what, you don't need me in this meeting this week. You guys take it on your own, and then team leader, come tell me how it went. And this is when you start to get your time back a bit more. Okay, so this is your reward for all your work up front and really being high touch and forming, dealing with a lot of the people stuff in storming. Now, norming, you start to take a step back. Now, leaders, this might feel hard. This might feel scary. How do I know they really have it? How do I know they're going to do this without me? So having that touch point. So figuring out, okay, what do these touch points look like? And how do I make sure that I'm getting the truth out of it versus I'm just getting the fake niceness or everything was great. Oh, no problems at all. So what that's going to look like, it'll be different for each team, but typically what it will look like is you're going to have one-on-ones still with everybody. So you'll notice a pattern. We have one-on-ones. We still manage, lead, and coach the individuals when they're on a team, because they still need that individual support from you. But this team dynamic, you're supporting them with learning their team dynamics. So you're going to get a little bit more pointed about how the team dynamics are working in those one-on-ones. You also can come and visit, right? Say, I'm not going to come every week to your meeting, but I'm going to come once a month. So I'll just come. I'm going to be a fly on the wall, but I just want to come, see how it's going. You guys are transitioning out onto your own, and, I trust you, but I just want to make sure that, it's my job to make sure that you guys are successful. So I want to make sure I'm supporting properly. So you visit every now and again, and you're asking about conflict. Okay, well, are you sensing any conflict amongst the team? Or get real specific, because you probably know some conflict. We can observe things from the outside as well. So just be specific, dig into it in those one-on-ones, and visit. And you can ask some questions when you're visiting as well. And your your fourth stage, I guess we'll say, is performing. So again, this is your big reward. If you've done your setup well in forming, you've taught them to deal with the conflict, with simple conflicts in storming, and you can start to really get good at keep coaching them through norming, and so they can take higher level conflicts. Performing is when they're really dealing with most of it on their own. They've learned the skills, they've practiced the skills, they've built the confidence. Now it's just a normal thing. To go back to how I talked about the learning cycle and the delegation, they're doing it subconsciously. They're doing it unconsciously, the word I'm looking for, because it's become such a way of working for them that hey, we have conflict, let's deal with it. This is like your dream spot, right? This is when that team is functioning well. You don't need to be high touch with them. You do still need to lead the individuals, right? You're having the coaching sessions with the individuals, and you still need a very smooth way of getting data because you're ultimately still responsible for what happens on that team. This is that big difference between delegation and abdication. So again, when you're starting a team, you're essentially delegating tasks. It could be, you could have a whole location, right? So you're delegating an entire huge task to another team, but you're essentially delegating tasks to a group of people instead of just an individual one. And you can't just abdicate it. You can't just say, you guys, your job, sayonara. You can't do that. And if you do these stages well, when you get to performing, your reward is that they are doing it without you, but you still need some kind of a checkpoint. So again, it's metrics reviews, it's coaching sessions, and maybe it's a kind of a once a year strategy update or something like that, or quarterly strategy update where they're working with you and they're kind of telling you where are we going. You're getting to ask questions. You're kind of saying, okay, that looks great. What about this? And how do we feel about that? And who's going to do that? And what resources do you need? Okay, awesome. Ready to go. So those are your 4 main stages of a team. And again, identifying where you are on this continuum is extremely helpful for how you should be leading. Side note here, if you're not sure where you are, or you're like, well, we might be a norming and you're not really sure, go back to forming. Always, when in doubt, go back to forming, double check, make sure it's all good, and then start to build those skills of managing the conflict. So, because that is really what's going to keep you stuck in storming. And a sidebar here as well, whenever you get a new team member, so someone leaves, someone new comes in, you have to go back to forming. It will be faster because you're only onboarding one person, but you have to go back to forming because this person doesn't know other people. They don't know the ways of working. They don't know really the real meaning behind the expectations that they've set, or they may not have been told them at all, right? So you have to go back, you have to share it with them. The whole team should be involved in like teaching them, holding them accountable to them, and bringing them on board so they start to really assimilate with the rest of the team as well. And that final stage that isn't always present is adjourning. But it's somewhat present if somebody leaves and somebody comes in, right? So that person leaves, so the team is somewhat adjourning there. But sometimes our teams are project teams. So let's say you're launching a new program and you work together for 3 years and then you're done. Okay, so there's a couple of very hardcore things that need to happen and a couple of soft, feely things that need to happen. So the leader needs to make sure that all the things that need to be documented are documented, they're filed where they need to be, any kind of follow-up or communication that's supposed to happen, or it has to come back to that team or to that area is available and taken place. But also there's grief that comes with change, with something ending. It could be something horrible that ends. There's still grief that comes with it. So you still have to help your team deal with the grief. So you need to give them time to deal with the grief. You need to be there for them to deal with the grief, and you need to get them on to the next thing so that we continue to move forward as well. So there is an element of hard stuff and soft stuff that has to happen, whether it's just one person leaving or the whole team breaking away. So if you are starting a team or you have a team, this is a great way to kind of check in. How are we doing? Have I done the things that I need to do? And are they doing the things that they need to do to make that team successful? If you would like some help with your team, I have resources. I've got Working Genius workshops to jump in through in the forming phase. I've got facilitated workshops that we can do to help learn some of the conflict skills and strategies that we can do. I've also got individual coaching that is hugely helpful for the leader, because as a leader, if you've never done this before, you're going through a lot of grief and change and learning, and you need some support in order to support your team well. It's putting on your oxygen mask. So reach out, let's have a chat. Let's see where you are, what you're doing, and if I can help or not. So it's always great to have someone to chat through. I have my synchronous coaching. So like when we actually sit down one-on-one together, and I've also got the asynchronous coaching available. So we have one sit down with that, and we can continue to kind of go back and forth and have touch points regularly. So we'll leave the links to both of those information pages in the show notes. And, if you're just really just not sure, just reach out and book a call with me, and we'll have a fantastic chat so that we can see what's needed. All right. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, and leave a review and or a comment on the YouTube. This is how we get the word out. This is how we get more education in front of people so they can have better teams, better businesses, and better home lives. So I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.